We're diving deep into the secrets behind TikTok creators who hit the 500K followers mark. From art tutorials to mental health, we'll dissect their strategies and uncover the keys to their massive following. Get ready to unravel their success.
I would love to dive in and start with kind of how you got started with this in terms of moving from, occupation in person, in real life. I think you're saying, teaching in nursing homes and those sorts of things.
Yeah.
And then pivoted this to online and what sort of opportunities that's unlocked. So how did you, where did you start and then where are you now?
Yeah. So what most people don't know is I have my following online, but what I do in person every day is I'm a traveling art studio. So I have a little wagon that I load up all my art and painting, and I visit retirement homes, nursing homes. I started working just one-on-one painting with memory care residents, just to give you an idea. So I was doing that full time before the pandemic hit. But think about the pandemic, everything shut down, especially the nursing homes. So all of a sudden, within a week, everybody canceled on me. It's like, oh, what do I do now? I mean, honestly, it was perfect timing because my husband and I had just bought a fixer-upper house that it was a total wreck. We ended up living in the basement for 6 months before we made it livable. So during that time, I had some time off. We renovated the whole house. And I kid you not, as soon as we got done with the renovations, I started getting some calls back. But at that time, I have been I realized I was at my limit as just being one person in a business, right? And being able to teach a small group, I knew that social media was a way to reach a much larger group of people, right? I was like, how can you clone yourself basically to be in more than one place at one time? So I started listening to podcasts like yours saying, okay, how could I start to make this transition? Because I knew how busy I was before the pandemic is not, I didn't want to be running myself ragged anymore because, I was making decent pay, but not enough to justify the amount of work that goes into getting all the supplies together, teaching a class, right? So I started listening to podcasts about how to use social media to grow your business, all right, online. And at the time, I was still teaching some, people brought me back in once things started opening up, and I was teaching a few classes that were painting, some that were crafting. I just started filming what I was doing every day, basically what I was teaching in the class. I would make a short reel on it or a short video about that, right? And just started putting it on Facebook. Something must have triggered the algorithm, though, on Facebook, because I don't know if you've heard, they have, bonuses now and things like that where they're paying kind of. I thought it was fake, but I just happened to be listening to a podcast that was talking about that, and I kid you not, when I was listening to the podcast, I opened my phone up and I had a notification inviting me into the program. I was like, no, really? They're going to pay me to post these? So I started posting them on my personal page.
Was this for real?
Okay. For real, yeah. Literally.
Yep.
Yeah, that's what I started. And I started getting paid right away. I started getting some followers. This was on my personal page, right?
Wow.
Wasn't even on my business page. Now, my business page, can I go into the story about how I went viral for the wrong reasons? Okay,
yeah.
So that's how I started getting paid online to start, all right? And so I started making these videos, and I kind of knew how social media worked and how much you could get traction, because when I was in college, I started saving Starburst wrappers. Some people might remember this was 5 years ago when it did go viral, but when it did, it scared the crap out of me. It really did, because it went mega viral. I made a dress out of Starburst candy wrappers. If you Google my name and Starburst candy wrappers, you will see me all over the internet. This was right when I was starting my painting business, though, so it had nothing to do with what I was actually doing for my business, right? So it caused an identity crisis in what I was doing in my business. Am I an upcycler, or do I make dresses now for a living, or am I still the teaching artist that I was trained to do, what my business was? So I started a Facebook page based on that, and I got a couple thousand people. Wasn't a lot, but I still get people sending me pictures of me in that dress in the front of their newspaper in different languages, randomly, different countries. So just to give you that idea. So bizarre.
Hilarious.
Yeah. So thankfully it was really more just a 5 minutes of fame thing though. So it wasn't a sustainable business, but I had this random Facebook page, right, that was just sitting there, and it was a business page. So I was like, well, why don't I start posting some of the stuff I am over there? So I did. And same thing with TikTok. But I started off with what I knew worked as far as getting people's attention. I started doing TikToks and Facebook Reels about like the dress and some of the other cool upcycling art that I did that was more
So
of a
you
hobby.
did leverage. Yeah, so
I
you
did
did
a little
leverage
bit.
that kind of
I
like
did.
moment of fame.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So I did just to get everybody's attention, you know, hey, I'm over here, right?
No, it's smart. That's really good.
Yeah. And then actually it initially worked on TikTok. Like one of them went in the algorithm, I guess, and I got like 100,000 followers like within a week. So I was like, okay, this is something to work with. But again, not sustainable because the dress alone took 5 years to make. And I can't be doing 5-year projects like every day to post on TikTok, right? So it's not a sustainable business model at all, but it got people's attention. That's what I'm most well known for. But thankfully I'm getting more well known for what I actually do to make money.
Yeah. No, that's great. And at least you understood that, hey, this was content that gets eyeballs.
Yes.
And then pivoted towards content that actually adds value.
Right.
Because I think there's a big difference between what gets attention and what gets views versus what actually adds value and you can turn into a business.
Right. So what most people, like a lot of people, especially on TikTok, they're all thinking, okay, everybody wants to watch you. But I think I heard a podcast talking about how like 90% or more of the content out there on social media is selfish content. It's not content that actually helps people. No, seriously, people are trying to show off, you know, to get views. And obviously because you're getting paid for views. But if you have a skill or if you have any talent, even if you think people won't care, or like maybe they want to watch this, like, oh, that's too commonplace. A lot of times that's the content you want to make because it's helping people. It's selfless content. It's service-based, right? So I was just sharing, back to the story about how it grew into what I'm doing now. I started filming like the crafting and some of the painting tutorials. I wasn't doing voiceovers yet. I was just doing short snippets because I didn't think people had the attention spans to like hear a whole voiceover, right?
Yeah.
But I did one, I think it was one of a beach to start, and somebody commented, this is really cool. I want to know how to do this. Can you do a voiceover tutorial? I'm like, okay, it was a little over 2 minutes long, I think, right? So I did it. Never done a voiceover, but I did it. Did the whole thing, like explained how I did it, posted it, and it got like a couple 100,000. It's over like a couple million now, I think, but people were actually watching it. So it was just like, really? This might work? So I was like, okay, I have a lot of paintings that I do in my classes on a regular basis. Why don't I film those and do short, like Spark Notes versions? You know, like because a lot of teaching artists online, especially like on YouTube, they're like an hour long. You know, people aren't going to watch that, especially on TikTok and Facebook Reels and stuff. So I did that, and I started pushing the limit a little bit, making 5-minute. I don't know how I have the ability to make 10-minute TikToks. I don't know how that happened because I know when I started, I only had a minute. But I've been pushing the limit. I keep increasing the time limit, and people are watching. Like I've had people comment saying, "It's like I forgot I was on TikTok," or "I watched the whole thing. How are you posting this long?" Right? So I know it's at least engaging content, but thank goodness, it surprised me that that's what I do on a daily basis. I didn't think anybody would care, especially because the paintings I'm doing, memory care residents can do them. Or like I'll get a commenter that's a hater, and they're like, "That's awful. A 4-year-old could do it." It's like, exactly.
That's the point, yeah.
That's the whole point, because like somebody messaged me the other day and said, "Thank you so much for what you're doing. You're really the only artist I can find out there that's actually teaching true beginner content. Most of the people who say they're teaching beginners are doing something that you already have to know how to hold a paintbrush, you know, how the paint works." So I'm starting at the very, very beginner basics. So I think that's why it's working. But thankfully, it was like the lowest hanging fruit to grab a hold of and be like, okay, I can do multiple videos of this because it's what I do every day and what I'm most used to doing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think a few takeaways from that for all listeners is, one, are you creating selfish or selfless content? Create more selfless content that adds value. I think, as you're saying, that content seems to get people engaged. People seem to watch it. And it breaks up their feed, because if they're just seeing people bragging all day, every day, or selfish content, and then all of a sudden they see selfless content where they're actually learning something or getting some value, then, you know, you might stand out. I think the other thing that you did really well was like listening to your comments and taking that feedback and adjusting. I think the biggest thing is people think that everything needs to be perfect for, their cameras, their setup and all that sort of stuff. But you kind of just listened to what they wanted and just gave it to them. And then that's sort of how you got started, it sounds. And then,
you don't
super
need
interesting.
fancy equipment. You don't need fancy equipment. I'm just doing it on my phone. I'm trying to get better, but I'm just doing it on the fly.
I think just to give people a bit of a background, I always like to ask kind of, when you first meet someone, how do you kind of explain what you do? Like, give me 1 or 2 sentences of like, hey, I do this, and this is what joy, happiness, or value I bring to people.
Yeah, absolutely. The easiest way to describe my platform and me in general is a mental health humorist, right? I love to add some levity to the conversation about mental health because it is such a dark and difficult topic to just kind of talk about in general. So I try to add levity to it. I try to make people feel like they're heard, that there's other people that go through what they go through, and hopefully at the end of the day, it makes them feel a little bit better.
Yeah, I think everybody listening should go check out Kai's content, especially on TikTok and Instagram. I think those are your 2 main platforms. But the range of topics that you cover and then you tie into mental health is really impressive, which we'll dive into in a minute. But let's go back a little bit. How did you sort of get into this? How did you turn this topic of interest that you had into, your full-time gig? You seem to have these social platforms going. You seem to have Patreon going, speaking events, all sorts of different things happening. How did you sort of go from just maybe having an interest in this topic to making it kind of like your full-time gig?
Yeah, well, first off, I don't sleep, so there's no sleep. That's how I get everything done all at once. I heard sleeping's fun. I guess I got to give it a try one day.
Overrated.
But I mean, honestly, it was one of those things where there was a lot going on in my life, and I felt lost. I didn't know which direction I wanted to take my life, and it got to a point that I'm like, I have to make a change. I have to do something in order to move my life forward in the way that I want it to move forward. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to document this, the way that it kind of continues and my journey here. So it started out with blogging. I would just write blogs about my day and, the things that I'm feeling and things that I'm going through. And then that kind of turned into, okay, I'm going to film my blog. And then it kind of turned into, okay, I'm going to put it, on social media platforms. And it started out with Facebook. And then a little platform called TikTok decided to just come onto the scene in 2020 and change the game for everybody. And I was very fortunate enough to kind of catch like the second or third wave of that. And, it kind of went from there. And yeah, I'm very, very fortunate to have the platform that I have.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that you do really well is the content that you release on TikTok. Like, you've nailed the format, the view, the style. Maybe give us a few tips on how to manage a good TikTok account, because you have 800,000 plus fans on there, tons of engagement, comments, people having discussions in there. What was some things that you did on TikTok? I know, getting in earlier also helps, but what are some things that you did to keep growing it and to keep building on that momentum? And how did you get to the point of producing those really good TikTok snippets?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I always tell people, number one, consistency and patience will always be your friend, right? So at the end of the day, you want to stay consistent with the type of content that you put out there. You want to also just stay patient with yourself. Not every video is going to go viral. You can't let numbers determine whether you're a good content creator or not, right? Because what people end up doing is they end up comparing themselves to like Charlie D'Amelio or like Jason Derulo. And when they're not getting those types of numbers, they're like, oh, I suck. No, that's not how it works at all. You kind of have to bring it back and put it into perspective. So what I would do with myself is say, okay, I'm going to put out this video. Maybe 100 people will see it. Maybe 100,000 people will see it. I don't care. As long as I can help at least one person, then it's worth it, right? So when you kind of start to shift your perspective in that way, it kind of changes the way that you go about judging whether something is successful or not. I can't tell you the amount of times that I get like a DM or an email or a message from somebody saying, hey, I watched your video about such and such, and it helped me here, or it pushed me in this direction, and I feel better now. Like that is success to me. Like that is like, okay, I feel like I'm going in the right direction here. So patience, consistency, and like just keep pushing forward, find out what works, what doesn't work. And the last thing is encourage engagement. So you kind of mentioned it before. When the algorithm on any of these platforms see that people are engaging with you and answering questions or having conversations in the comments, that the algorithm takes all of that into play, right? So you have to like encourage that to take place.
Got it. And I think, you obviously cover mental health, which is always a little bit of a tricky topic.
Yeah.
I know, there's a fine line between helping, educating, or maybe like offending or stirring up bad emotions from past trauma or whatever it may be. How do you sort of toe that line, or how do you create that engagement, or is there anything that you do specifically that really gets your community or vibers kind of like going in the comments, or really engage with the content?
I call them vibers. I call them vibers because it's so weird to call people my followers. It makes it feel like I have like a cult. Like it's like, come on, followers, come follow me.
It is true.
Like, so I call them my vibers. But
it's a great name though. I love it.
Yeah, it kind of worked out. So I'm glad that people like are cool with it. There's actually a couple of rules that I follow when it comes to talking about mental health. Number one, I never punch down, right? I never make fun of people or situations. I try to make every piece of content relatable as opposed to offensive, right? Number two, I mainly only talk about things that I'm diagnosed with, right? So that's anxiety, depression, and ADHD. So you won't find me doing too much about like OCD or, being bipolar, borderline personality disorder, like that kind of stuff. I'll steer away from. I'll educate myself on it, but I'll never make the humorous content surrounding that, because I'm not in that realm. So I don't want to try to make fun or find humor in something that I don't fully understand. I try to stick to those rules. And I just listen to the audience. They'll let you know if something's like, hey, that kind of crossed the line, or that, that made me feel a certain way. You kind of have to like listen to what they say, and you'll kind of get a feel for what's okay and what's not. And vice versa, the audience will get a feel for what kind of content you put out there, and then they'll decide to either follow you or not.
Yeah, it's true. Not everybody's going to be a fan or like what you do, but that's just the nature of having the internet. Everybody can tune in.
And people will definitely let you know when they don't like you. They'll definitely let you know when they don't like you.
Yeah, well, that's interesting because I was talking to, on another episode, someone who kind of like rebutted flat earthers. Super interesting niche to be in.
Yeah.
But he would do science-backed arguments with people making crazy claims on YouTube. And he was like, the more upset or angry, the longer the conversations go, the more engagement and the more views seem to come in. So
like honestly, you kind of have to play that game as a content creator, right? Because there are certain things that I'll do purposefully, knowing that people in the comments are going to react a certain way, right? Because and when they're typing out stuff, it's like, okay, cool, that video is still playing in the background. Thanks, appreciate you. So that's part of being a content creator, and when I say encourage engagement, I don't just mean saying, hey, comment down below. Like, I mean, like you like saying things that for a fact people are going to be like, wait a second, or people are going to be like, oh, I want to reply to this, or whatever it may be.